Yeah, the recording. Hello and welcome to FACT's webinar, Raising Dairy Sheep for Exceptional Milk. Our guest presenters are Carrie and Brent Wasser. I'm Samantha Gasson, FACT's Humane Farming Program Director, and I will be monitoring this session. Before we dive right in, let me take a minute or two to do a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust, or FACT, is a national nonprofit organization that works to ensure that all food-producing animals are raised in a humane and healthy manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers through our Humane Farming Program, promoting policies that make foods from animals safe and healthy to eat through our Safe and Healthy Foods program, and generally help consumers make informed food choices. Please visit our website at foodanimalconcerns.trust.org to learn more about all of our farmer services. As always, I would like to thank my wonderful colleague, Catherine Hoke, who is joining us to help field questions and take over if my internet decides to misbehave. At this time, I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed presenters, Carrie and Brent Wasser. Carrie and Brent have been sheep farming since 2018. Before they became farmers, Brent spent many years in food production and taught at the Culinary Institute of America. Carrie was a newspaper journalist and later the editor of a local food magazine in Vermont. Now they own and operate the only sheep dairy in the Hudson Valley of New York. They are also members of the Dairy Sheep Association of North America. We are super lucky to have such talented and experienced shepherds with us today to talk about all things dairy sheep. Without further ado, I will turn the floor over to you, Carrie and Brent, so that you can begin your presentation.
Thanks, Samantha. I will share my screen and also, there we go. Let's see here. All right. So I'm going to do slideshow. Beginning. How does that look?
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Well, we are very, very happy to be here sharing knowledge about dairy sheep because we're big fans of FACT. We were recipients of a Fund a Farmer grant last year, and we plan to engage in the new advocacy program that FACT is running with the ASPCA, whereby we will, along with other farmers, become advocates in legislatures for humane farm animal welfare bills. So thank you very much for having us. This is really meant to be an overview of sheep dairying. Honestly, every topic that we cover could end up being 2 or 3 webinars in and of themselves. So we're not sure how many people watching this are already milking sheep, maybe just milking a few sheep. We're not sure if you're homesteading or running a commercial farm. So we're just going to be very broad here in our explanations. But first, we want to start with explaining our farm. So we farm on 65 acres in the Hudson Valley of New York State. We're halfway between Albany and New York City. And we farm on family land, about 35 acres in pasture out of those 65 acres. And so we're a pasture-based farm. We pasture raise all of our sheep in the grazing season. And we have about 40 dairy ewes. The number fluctuates a little bit, but we raise 40 dairy ewes and we milk all of them. And from those dairy ewes, every March, we get approximately 80 lambs. So those lambs, about 60 of those lambs are raised for meat on our property. We process in the fall and sell meat in the fall and winter. And we also keep about 15 to 20 ewe lambs, and they grow up to become future milkers. We also keep 2 dairy rams on the property, and we also have a teaser ram. So also wanted to mention that in addition to pasture raising, we feed a grain supplement. We're going to get into the grain supplement later on. And we feed New York State grown hay in the winter. I guess we can advance the slide. So these are our products. The primary product we make is yogurt. You can see the glass jars that we bottle in. We take a lot of care to make our jars very attractive. Our yogurt is sold in 50 stores between Albany and New York City. through 2 distributors. So that's the wholesale side of our business. We also sell yogurt and bottled milk at farmers markets. So in the upper right corner, you'll see our milk bottles. We again bottle the milk in glass as well, try to make it attractive. And then this past season, Brent started to make fresh sheep's milk ricotta with some of our excess milk from the spring. And so these are our main dairy products. We'll get into our other products like lamb and wool and all of that later on. But I just think it's important to say that we have a mix of sales outlets. So we have, as I mentioned, the distributors taking yogurt to stores. We sell at 3 farmers markets, and then we also have a small farm store on our property. Even though we sell yogurt and milk and fresh cheese, I wanted to mention that other producers in the US, most producers I would say, make aged cheeses with their milk. They also make ice cream, gelato, frozen yogurt, skyr, etc. I would say yogurt is a close second after aged cheese, however. Butter, less common, because if you take the cream to make butter from sheep's milk, you're left with skim sheep's milk. And because the value of sheep milk is in the creaminess of it, that's really what it's valued for. Ending up with skim sheep milk is really not economically smart. Also want to mention that we are considered to be producer processors, which means we produce the milk and we process the milk into value-added products. But there are a number of sheep dairy farms across the US that are producer only. So they produce the milk and then they sell that milk to processors who then turn it into cheese or other things.
So what's special about sheep's milk? Well, the first thing is that it is higher in fat than goat or cow's milk. If you look at this chart here, you can see that sheep's milk contains almost twice as much fat compared with cow's milk. So it's really creamy. And it's high in protein, higher in protein than the others. So for yogurt, we get this exceptional set. It's a cup set yogurt. It makes a firm, scoopable yogurt that's very, very delicious. It's a mild and sweet milk. It tastes almost like cow's milk. So, excuse me. So for people who are used to drinking cow's milk, but maybe they can't tolerate it, often we find that customers enjoy and can easily digest sheep's milk. It's a high yielding milk, meaning that when you make a hard cheese, you're going to get about a 10% yield on cow's milk. But if you make a hard, meaning a semi-soft or semi-hard cheese with sheep's milk, you get 18 to 20% yield because of the higher solids. So it's an exceptional milk for those reasons. We have had a lot of success with our bottled milk because people really do seek it out. And we have the advantage of being the only sheep dairy in the Hudson Valley. So you would have an advantage in your area because you are exceptional and sheep dairying is not very common. And we milk seasonally, meaning that we milk between late April and October. So our lactation lasts about 220 days, and we often find that by about September, we see our milk production drop considerably, and that's the natural lactation curve. So we manage a seasonal herd, meaning that in the beginning of the season, when the ewes all reach peak lactation together, we have our greatest amount of production, and then the milk quality and the milk quantity change as the season progresses. So if you want to milk sheep all year long, you're going to need to usually have multiple flocks, meaning 2 or even 3 groups that you can then have lambing at different times during the year so that you get an even supply of milk throughout the entire period that you would like to have it.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about dairy breeds. So the primary sheep dairy breed in the US right now is East Friesian. That's a breed that originated in Northwest Germany, German border with Holland around there. And dairy sheep breeds have not been in the US for very long. So maybe 40 years, I want to say, 40, 50 years. And it started with the East Frisian, and that's very dominant here now. That is followed up by the presence of the Lacone breed, which originated in southern France. Lacone milk is used to make Roquefort cheese, I think exclusively Roquefort cheese. And we're very fortunate to have now Lacone represented in the US thanks to the Dairy Sheep Association of North America. Their logo is right there because Desana imported frozen Lacone semen from France in 2017 and had some successful artificial insemination with those straws. And so now a lot of sheep dairies in the US can enjoy the more diverse genetics from having both Lacone and East Frisian. Same goes for the Asaf breed, which is, I think it originated in Israel, and it's a cross of the East Frisian and the Awasi, which is a Middle Eastern fat tail sheep. On the top photo, that's an East Frisian. That's one of our East Frisians. And then on the bottom photo, that is one of our dairy rams who is about 65% Lacone. What's important to say about the East Frisian is that we have found that it makes the wool is very nice. It's not high-end wool. It's not poor wool. It is wool that is very appreciated by the weaver who we work with, and it has produced for us some quite soft blankets. You might notice that the wool on the ram here, the picture, is not as long. The Lacone is not really known for its wool. There's actually a lot more lanolin in the Lacone breed.
This is a related question. What about Icelandics for dairy?
So we don't have experience milking any other breeds than the East Frisian and the Lacone, so we really can't speak to that. But I will talk in the next slide a little bit about why using a dairy breed is highly, highly recommended if you're going to have a commercial milking operation. So I'll get to that in a second. But before we leave this slide, I want to mention that the East Frisian also produces a very good meat carcass. So as I mentioned, the 60 lambs that we save every year to raise for meat have produced pretty good hanging weights. You know, they're not Dorsets, they're not Texels, but they have done us well in the meat department. And then lastly, high quality dairy rams can be difficult to find in the US, and that is because there are very few sheep dairies in the US. Some of you may be surprised to hear that there are an estimated only maybe 75 to 100 commercial sheep dairies in the entire country. I think there are more in Canada, but all of us are very, very spread out across the country. So Brent and I have to go very far, quite often very far, to find a good quality dairy ram. We drove to Kansas City to get the fellow in this photo. There are many reasons why there are few sheep dairies in the US, but maybe you can kind of figure it out as we go along. So why am I following the breed slide with a milk metering slide? That's because in order to choose the best breed and even the best ewes within a breed, you really need to get a handle on how much milk is being produced per ewe by each ewe. You can look at a ewe, milk out a ewe, think that she is your highest producer, but she may not be. The length of time it takes to milk out a ewe is not necessarily an indicator of her production. You want to get accurate numbers by using milk meters. These happen to be meters that are produced by the New Zealand company Waikato, Waikato. They're on the expensive side. You can also meter milk using a ball jar. And if you look on the DSANA website, there are resources there to guide you on the different ways that you can meter milk. But obviously, production informs our breeding choices. To get to the question about the Icelandics, sheep produce much less milk than cows, obviously, and less milk than goats. And so you are doing the same amount of work, paying for the same amount of labor as if you were milking goats, but you're producing much less milk. So you really want to make sure that you are choosing ewes that have the level of production that will match your economic needs. And very often for commercial sheep dairies, that is not a meat breed. If you're milking a few sheep at home to have milk for your family, obviously you can milk any sheep, any breed. But we highly recommend that you look into the dairy breeds for any commercial enterprise. The next 4 lines on this slide show that we don't just select ewes for milk production, but we also take into consideration udder shape, which affects the speed of the milk out and the udder health. Temperament, whether they're stompers on the platform, makes a difference. Is the ewe more susceptible to parasites than her flock mates? And then mother and qualities are very important. So those are that's sort of the overview of how we make our decisions about not only what breed to raise, but which individual ewes to keep and which of their offspring to keep.
That's right. And I can speak about udder health now, but just in terms of the breeds, remembering that the dairy breeds typically have longer legs, they stand higher, they have less wool around the udder, and for many generations, they've been selected for this udder conformity or the udder shape, which is so important. So other breeds are usually not, they have no history of being chosen for those qualities. So it may be a disadvantage to try to milk, for example, a very woolly sheep standing close to the ground with a large udder after lambing. It leads to problems. And one of those problems can be udder health. So udder health begins with the healthy shape of the udder and a well-functioning udder. So we want to see, just like you see in the picture here, a well-proportioned udder that has good attachment, and the teat placement is in the right place to facilitate milking. So teats kind of at the on a clock, I suppose it would be like the 7 and the 8, or the 5 and the 7 position. Good sanitation is critical for udder health because not only in the milking parlor, but in the barn or even out in the pasture, we want to be sure that the sheep are not going to be exposed to infection because mastitis is our #1 concern. So in the parlor, we wash the udder and the teat before milking. After milking, we're using an iodine-based teat dip. And this is just like you would with cows or goats. And then in the barn, we make sure that we keep it dry and clean. We're trying to avoid infection. We're trying to especially isolate Staph A, which is here on the slide. You can see Staphylococcus aureus. That is the main pathogen that causes subclinical mastitis. And it can be a big problem in sheep, just like it could be in cows or goats. And it's highly transmissible. So we monitor for that. We test our milk for that. We test individual sheep milk samples for that. And you can see on the right in the picture here, these are individual samples that are going to a lab to be tested for not only somatic cell count, which is the last point on this slide here, but protein and fat. So somatic cell count is the last factor, and that's an indication of infection in the udder. Typically, you want to see a value of 200,000 cells per milliliter or less, while the FDA will allow up to 750,000 per milliliter. That would already be a level that would indicate subclinical problems, meaning an infection. So that's an introduction to udder health.
Can I ask a
And
quick
then-
question? this seems very related. What labs are you using for your milk testing? And if you want to send that to me and I can put it in a the follow-up email, that's fine. But are you getting it done by your state lab or are you getting it done by a private lab?
That's a good question. So in New York State specifically, we do send samples to the Quality Milk Production Service, which is QMPS. And then at a national level, there are labs throughout the country under the acronym of DHIA, which is the Dairy Herd Improvement Association. And most commercial cow dairies are going to be working with DHIA. DHIA is going to give you a reading on somatic cell count, fat, and protein in the milk. And that goes along with the metering in the parlor to give you a sense of each animal's production. So you can get a sense of production and milk quality and udder health when using that program. So this is nutrition. This slide, why are we talking about nutrition? Nutrition is really critical with dairy sheep because it's somewhat less understood. Dairy sheep need more energy and more protein compared with sheep raised for meat or for wool. So for example, if you are milking sheep and you go to your local feed mill and buy the sheep grain and feed it to your sheep, that is not going to be adequate to meet their needs typically. So it's very important to understand that lactating sheep have a high demand and they are bred to put their energy, the energy of their bodies, the nutrition that goes into their bodies, into their milk. So even if if they're not getting enough nutrition to support their milk, you will see them lose body condition. So how do we counteract that? We need to make sure that we meet their needs by feeding adequate energy, which would be in the form of corn. You can see on the bottom left picture there. That's an image of our grain mix, which contains whole corn and roasted soybeans. We also feed alfalfa pellets at times. We also feed soybean meal, which is a very high concentration for protein, high concentrate protein supplement in the diet. We choose to feed only organic grain. These things are available to us locally. Depending on your location, you may have access to other types of feeds. For example, in California, there are different types of feedstuffs available compared with here where we are in New York. Of course, grass, meaning forages, hay, that's the base of nutrition. But we have found that we need to supplement with grain. Grass-fed sheep dairying is possible, but you need to make sure that the animals' needs are met and that probably you are breeding for the specific feed that you're going to offer animals in a grass-only situation. So it is a balancing between production and nutrition. Okay, so here on the bottom left, you can see an image showing body condition. Body condition scoring is a way that we, throughout the season, depending on the animal's stage of gestation, meaning pregnancy, or lactation, we can check how they feel along the back near the tail. And these profile sections show what an animal would look like if she is emaciated, that would be score 1, up to obese, that would be score 5. And our goal is to maintain an average of 3, right in the middle. And we check throughout the year. We're always monitoring our animals and adjusting their nutrition if we perceive that they're not getting enough, or maybe too much. In the top left image, that's a picture of us with lambs out in the field, actually, where we're seeing how well the lambs are growing, making sure that their needs are being met. And on the bottom right, this is a ewe very near lambing time. So that last month of gestation is a month of incredible nutritional need for the sheep. So it's very important to be aware of their intake of protein, energy, as well as minerals.
Okay, so what do we do with all the lambs, right? Obviously the ewes have to have lambs to get the lactation started. So on sheep dairies, there are a few ways to manage this. Some dairies choose to remove the lamb from the ewe either immediately at birth or perhaps 24 hours later after colostrum has been consumed. The lambs are then raised on milk replacer, and the ewes are milked immediately in the parlor. Another option, which is what we do, is we allow the lambs to nurse naturally on the ewes for about 30 days. We wean the lambs at 30 days, and they have to be at least 30 days old and at least 30 pounds. At that point, we wean. And on that day, we start milking the ewes, and the lambs go off to pasture to be raised separately. Another system, which is some people really like to do, others have chosen not to do this, is the 12-hour system, whereby you allow the lambs to nurse on the ewes during the day, and then you separate the lambs at night. And so therefore in the morning, when you bring the ewes into the milking parlor, you have more milk because the offspring and the ewes had been separated than you would if they had stayed together. We use the natural nursing system for a variety of reasons, but the others are acceptable as well.
I have a quick question. This is my question. This isn't anybody else's question. So we've always done the calf sharing with our cows, and we find that we have some females that they will withhold that last little bit of fat, and that they will not let it down. They save that for their babies. Is that something that sheep will do as well, or is that a cow, a Jersey cow thing? Because that's what I've got Jerseys.
Sheep will do that. They will do that. They've been talking to the cows. So it does happen. Again, we have never done the 12-hour system, but you have to understand that that's a possibility. Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Samantha. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next slide.
So a little overview of milking equipment is in order. So the milking equipment is very similar to what one would expect to use for cows and for goats. The milking unit consists of 2 cups that go on the teats. There are sheep-sized and sheep-specific shells and inflations available. However, we have chosen to use cow-sized inflations, and they work very well. So in the picture on the top left, you can see those milking units hanging there behind the ewes. And we milk with a low-line system. So it's a vacuum system that collects the milk into a pipe that goes into a receiving jar, and that is then automatically pumped into our bulk tank where the milk is held cold. Other ways to milk, there is always the bucket system available. So this image on the right shows a portable vacuum pump with a milking can. And that is a lower cost investment and might be a good way to start, especially for a person who is looking to milk maybe only 12 to 15 animals. Although if you start to get into larger numbers, what we have found is that the pipeline system saves us a lot of time, especially with washing, because it is an integrated system with a washing component, so we can put it together, it washes in place. On the bottom left, you see 2 pictures of hand milking. This bottom left image comes from a location in Italy where that's how it has traditionally been done in Italy. Stabilize the ewe using the legs. You can bend over the back and then milk backwards like that. And this other image shows a ewe on a milking platform that accommodates 1 animal at a time. That's actually something that I used during a period when I was milking sheep in Germany. So There are other ways to do it. Hand milking, while permitted, will be more scrutinized by your inspector. And the main reason is it is not the most sanitary way to collect milk because you have the milk in an open bucket. And so the milk is very easily exposed to anything that might fall in or insects. We can continue on here.
A
Little
quick
few words
question.
about,
Quick
yes,
question. So, how easy is it to hand milk? That was a question we had in the Q&A.
that's a good question. So typically you will find that the sheep's teats are smaller than goat teats, and certainly smaller than most cow teats. And so for a person with very large hands, sometimes it can be a challenge. Although milking a sheep often is more about kind of even securing the hand up above the teat attachment point. And so you're really kind of high up on the udder. And with practice, a person can easily learn how to do that. Part of our milking protocol is to strip out the initial milk. And so that's always done by hand. And so we're very used to doing that, and it certainly is possible. So some words about milk processing. This is consistent across any type of milk in the United States. If you're going to be producing for commercial sale, the first step is to talk to your state inspector, reach out and start a conversation, because you don't want to make any investments that aren't in compliance with state and even federal regulations. The picture that you see on the top left is of our creamery. In there we have a pasteurizer. We have a chilling machine that cools water for cooling the milk. We have a filling machine for filling the yogurt jars and the milk bottles. We have warming cabinets for incubating the yogurt. And of course, sanitation is very important. So we have a hand washing sink, or a wash sink for equipment. And we have a sanitizing dishwasher. Other things that you might need to have in a spot where you want to process milk would be a cheese vat that could be separate from your pasteurizer, brine tank, cheese press, any kind of cheese equipment, or ice cream equipment. But again, the first thing that you really want to do is make sure that your layout, your utilities, the way you're building your building, the way you finish your walls are in compliance with state expectations and regulations. And I can speak more about this if there's specific questions about milk processing.
Okay. So just wanted to mention, so if we haven't communicated this adequately enough so far, sheep milk is really quite exceptional. It is really, really good because of the creaminess and the mild flavor. That is what is going to hook most people. But it also reportedly, by many of our customers at least, is much, much more digestible than cow milk. So we have a lot of customers who are simply unable to have cow milk. One person tried our milk and told us at a farmer's market she hadn't drunk milk in 20 years and was just over the moon that she could tolerate the sheep milk. It is also higher in protein and higher in calcium. So it's very filling. I mean, Brent will drink it as lunch in the middle of working in the creamery. It's got a lot going for it. And these will be your strong points if you ever have to market it. Also, I want to mention that many of our customers are either immigrants from countries where sheep dairy is very much part of the culture, or they're from families with a family heritage in those countries. And I'm talking about places like France, Spain, Turkey, Greece, Iran, sort of all around the Mediterranean. There's a great history of consuming sheep milk products. So they can also be considered your dependable customers. So those are the strong points. Some people will run the numbers and realize that they need to charge more for their sheep dairy products than what is available in most yogurt or milk sections of the grocery store. So if you look at this photo, this is some of our yogurt on a shelf. This store has chosen to charge $7.49 for our roughly 8-ounce jar and $11.99 for our roughly 16-ounce jar. That is actually very close to our MSRP, and that price seems high when you're looking at cow yogurt in the same size, but many customers, I would say most customers who try the yogurt, they understand that it's different, that it's special, particularly because we communicate that specialness through the pretty glass jar. So don't be shy about having to charge a high price, quote unquote, high price, right? Our margins are pretty slim. We're working on that and improving every year towards financial sustainability. But just because the sheep milk price is high does not mean that we are getting back a lot of that money. We're doing the same amount of work, again, as a cow dairy farmer or a goat dairy farmer, but we're getting much less milk. So we have to charge more per unit. And then lastly, I just want to say you'll have to educate your consumers as well as the stores that you sell to about the seasonality. You'll have to remind them every year that, for example, in this picture down here, this is one of my Instagram posts, 2 weeks left for sheep's milk. After a season or two, most of your regulars at the farmer's market will understand that it's going to go away for 6 months. But it's also important to educate the stores, because stores want product year round, and most of us milking sheep on a small scale with just one lambing per year can't produce that year-round product. And then I think this is our last slide. I just want to mention the other things that we make here at Willow Pond Sheep Farm. We want to value all parts of the sheep as a way to respect the animal, and we also need to value every part to become financially sustainable. So as I mentioned before, we save 60 lambs from the lambing each year, raise those for meat. And we sell packaged lamb cuts direct to consumer at farmers markets in the winter. We do not sell any lamb wholesale. We need to capture that retail dollar. Then when the lambs are processed, we ask the butcher to save all of the skins. We salt the skins and we send them to a tannery, Vermont Natural Sheepskins. I'll put a plug in for them. Vermont Natural Tannery, excuse me. And they're tanned without synthetic chemicals. These sheepskins, as you see in the bottom left photo, they sell very well at farmers markets. And then we're very proud of what we do with our wool. This is wool that we shear from our dairy sheep every January. We send the wool to a mill. It's turned into yarn, and that yarn is sent to a weaver, professional weaver in the Adirondacks who works with wooden hand looms, and she makes about 15 to 20 blankets for us every season with that wool. And then you can see one of our blankets. It's not a great photo, but see one of the blankets in the top photo. It's dyed blue with natural indigo plant dye that the weaver makes, and we sell these. They're expensive, but they are seen by the customers as the special things that they are. We're also experimenting now with using lamb and ewe tallow to make candles, and we've tried soap as well. So we're very committed to really offering a wide array of products for people, and being able to offer more than just sheep dairy sort of cements our relationship with our farmers market customers, because they can drink our milk, eat our yogurt, have one of our wool blankets on their sofa, have a sheepskin on their chair, and then serve lamb at the holidays. It's a very nice way to build community. Okay, I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. I'm always in danger of starting a sheep dairy, and so my husband's not going to be very happy that I did this webinar today. So I haven't told him because I didn't want to hear about it, because I love my sheep, but I only have meat sheep. So to start off, I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to collect yourselves, maybe get some water. We are going to go ahead and run our end of webinar poll, which is very helpful for us when we look at getting funding, because you guys are able to attend our webinars for free, and we do compensate our presenters. So thank you very much for going ahead and answering these few very, very simple questions. All right, Catherine, you want to start us off with the very first question?
Sure.
Can I just say one thing really question? Yeah, so there will be a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to this recording. Go ahead.
And we'll also have a link to the slides, which I know some folks were having trouble with. We need to change the permissions, but we'll get that out to you tomorrow. So this question comes from Winter, who asks, if you're raising 50% of your milking flock size as replacements, is that because you have a high annual cull or turnover rate, or are you growing your milking flock or selling breeding stock to others?
Good question.
All
Yeah.
three.
Well, I think the main answer is we've been growing. So in our first year, we milked 12 ewes. In our second year, we were at 24. Then we hovered around 32, 33. Last year, we increased to, how many did we breed last year?
I think we bred 40, milked 38.
Yeah. Right. And so in this past year, we bred 49. So we've been increasing our flock. We have also been culling animals, usually for reasons around udders more than anything else. So speaking about udder health, udder shape, those are important qualities.
All right. So we've had quite a few questions about how do these wool breeds, and particularly the dairy breeds, how do they handle heat and humidity? And somebody was in Florida who asked that question.
Oh, well, we have found that with our flock, the sheep do not do well in heat. Heat being usually over 80 degrees with a humidity of 75 or 80% or higher. On days like that, we typically bring our animals back into the dairy barn no later than 12 noon because the afternoon heat is too intense. The animals will suffer the heat, they will pant, which is something we don't want. Another factor is that it greatly affects how well they graze or eat in general. So their intake goes down and then their milk production falls. Heat stress can also lead to higher somatic cell count in the milk. And so it can lead to problems with milk quality. Anything else?
That's good.
Yeah.
Are milk sheep more susceptible to mastitis? It wasn't listed if they're more susceptible than what? Than cows or goats, but if you could speak to that, be great.
Are they more susceptible? I would say that there tends to be with the people that we know through DSANA, DSANA, the sheep milking sheep group, we know that subclinical mastitis is a very important problem in dairy flocks with sheep. And so whereas acute mastitis, that would be something that would present itself as clumping or, for example, blood in the milk. Subclinical mastitis does not show itself with clear symptoms, but can impact the animal's health and the animal's production and milk quality. And that tends to be something that we talk about a lot within these groups. So what would you add to that?
I would just add that if you join the Dairy Sheep Association of North America, which I highly recommend. There's lots of resources on mastitis, and honestly, mastitis and nutrition are still really, we're all still trying to figure it out. There are lots of factors that go into both, and there's no real clear, easy answer. But if you're going to follow any group that is working on this and has cutting edge information, it's Desana. I wish we could say more, but we're not really able to compare to other species or even other breeds.
All right, the next question is from somebody who has declined not to share their name. I am new to dairy sheep and ended up with a ewe who throws quads and gives between 3/4 and 1 gallon per day during lactation, according to her previous shepherd. She also lost elasticity in her udder and she came bred, and I'm wondering if the udder issue might be due to a nutrition deficiency or genetics. So if I decide to keep her, sorry. So if I can decide if keeping her ewe lambs would be a good idea. Thank you. I know I had a cow once who had lost, it's that ligament, it gets loose. And I had a cow
Yeah.
once. She was hard
So
the milking machine to milk.
udder shape is an inherited trait. So you can't really expect a different kind of udder to form year after year if you change the seed program. Right now, Desana is working on starting to work on sort of focusing producers on selecting for udder conformation. So when you talk to a producer to buy sheep, you want to see their udders, ask for photos of the udders. I would say in this case, though, if the person is getting the amount of milk that they want from this sheep and is okay tolerating the milking of the poor udder, then you can certainly keep those lambs and milk them and see what happens. Or you can breed that ewe to a ram who has good throws lambs with good udder conformation.
Right. It depends on the sire for the lamb question. And in terms of pendulous udders, that's a quality that usually doesn't reveal itself until maybe the 3rd year of life. You're not going to see that in a yearling or even in the 2nd year, but the udder will start to descend. And that type of situation can lead to udder damage. If you imagine that animal walking out in the pasture with an udder that is full and not well attached. So it's not a good long-term picture.
We had quite a few questions about nutrition, and I know that you're saying that that's something that's still kind of being perfected and figured out. But if you could share, I'm going to try to digest a few of these questions together. Who do you work with formulating your feed? It said it seems like maybe you mix your own custom mix as opposed to having a mill mix it for you. Local nutritionists are not really aware of dairy sheep needs, so just any advice you could give on that would be great.
Yeah, there are very few nutritionists in the US that work on dairy sheep specifically. The few that we know about, I'm not sure if they're taking new clients, so I don't want to mention their names, but if somebody listening to this is interested, just email us and we can connect you. We do mix our own feed. We decided that given what our mill could produce, which was very limited in its protein level, we needed to add more protein, we needed more calcium. So we bought a small concrete mixer at Home Depot or wherever, and it was about $200, I think, and it's really paid off. It takes a bit of time to mix your own feed, but we can change the mix based on the time of the gestation, or we can mix a special feed for the lambs.
Right. I would just add that we ask our mill to produce a base mix, which is whole corn and soybeans. And then, so that's the majority of the feed we feed. But then we take the soybean meal and lime and molasses and mix a top dressing. And so having effectively energy and protein as 2 separate components, we can then adjust those 2 factors. In the picture that you saw, which showed me with the cement mixer, I was actually mixing grain that we feed to our lambs because the lambs also have a certain need in terms of a high protein grower diet, especially during the first 6 months. So that's what that was showing.
What about
think
in your
that's amazing.
pastures? What grasses are you growing?
Oh yeah. So our pastures are varied. We're fortunate to have access to land because that is a problem in our area in the Mid-Hudson Valley, farmers having access to land. On our pastures, we have a mix of timothy, white clover, bird's foot trefoil, and perennial ryegrass. We are seeking to improve our pastures through the regular addition of lime as well as compost, and also overseeding with additional grasses such as meadow fescue, because we do have some somewhat wet areas that don't tolerate certain grasses, or certain grasses don't tolerate well. So that's our picture on the pastures.
I'm gonna stop sharing the screen there.
Okay.
All right. So a couple of questions. Do you do a CMT test with your ewes? I mean, I know you're doing the testing that you're sending off, but do you also do a CMT?
Yes, we try to do CMT every 2 weeks or so during the milking season, and if any ewe is found to have a, I guess you call it positive, in a significant way, we will have her milk tested.
And then a follow-up question, or not a follow-up question, but a related question. What do you do if you've got a ewe that's constantly getting staph A? Do you end up getting rid of her, or do you just, how do you handle that?
If she's getting clinical staph A, she should be called right away. It's highly contagious within the flock. And we've made the mistake of keeping some ewes who have had staph A a little too long. And it's been bad. It's been rather inhumane for the ewe and not good for the rest of the flock. So that's a lesson that we've had to learn. Subclinical mastitis is tricky. But again, you have to look at the whole picture, the SCC count, the milk tests, the quality of the milk, etc.
Right, and usually testing several times, because the first positive result may not lead to a second positive result. And something that we haven't done is any type of intramammary treatment. We really haven't found that antibiotic treatment is something that we pursue for treating animals with staph A.
And when you send your tests, and if you do end up with I know I've done this with my cows before that have had mastitis. I've sent off a milk sample to the lab, and then they'll tell me exactly what bacteria the infection is, and then I can treat specifically for that bacteria. So you guys don't treat at all, or you just cull any because I mean I've had it before where I'll get a cow, she'll have mastitis maybe her first round of calving, but then she won't have it again ever.
We milk the udder out if affected. We've seen animals recover without treatment. Usually most of our cases arise actually early in the season while we are still allowing the lambs to nurse and we are not milking. So at that point we do treat, and we usually are able to get the circumstance under control before we start milking. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah. If you're going to continue to milk a ewe that has had a positive test, milk her last. Milk her last in the string so that you're not spreading any of the milk from her udder onto the platform or your hands and then touching another ewe.
That's one of the great risks, though, of allowing lambs to nurse, because everyone's in the barn together and lambs can sometimes share ewes, and so they can be a vector for disease transmission.
All right, thank you guys.
Could you speak briefly about the startup costs for dairy?
Yeah. Well, it depends what kind of infrastructure you are beginning with. So if you already have a building that you might be able to retrofit to meet your needs, that's going to save you a lot. In terms of the milking parlor, you saw there are different ways, different approaches to doing this. We've seen short platforms built out of plywood that accommodate 6 ewes and a portable vacuum pump outside that room with a milking can, and that's one way to do it. And your investment there is going to be a lot lower than what you saw pictured in our parlor, which is the galvanized steel platform with the low line system. So there are different ways to look at that. And if you're going to be processing on the farm, then you can also consider the costs of different approaches there. So we didn't mention this too much, but there were some questions from some of the registrants about pasteurization. Pasteurization is required for any type of grade A product, yogurt, bottled milk, kefir, anything like that. However, you can make a raw milk cheese as long as it's aged longer than 60 days. So if you want to start off and make cheese that's aged more than 60 days, you can forego the purchase of a pasteurizer. So there are different ways to save. It depends on what your long-term plan is. In terms of a number, I mean, it really depends. But with the equipment, I would say any even small size operation should be looking at $200,000 just to be sure.
Another reason why my husband won't let me do dairy. Do you, are herd shares, or I guess flock shares, legal in New York? Because that is another way, if you wanted to sort of get started, you could do a herd or a flock share.
Well, raw milk, this is concerning raw milk sales. Raw milk sales are permitted in New York State from the farm. But from the beginning, we didn't really anticipate most of our business being conducted on the farm. We thought we would be selling through distribution more than anything. And so that's all off-farm sales. So pasteurization was from the beginning something that we planned for. It does depend on your state, though. The herd share or flock share approach is sometimes permissible. It depends on your state. If your state doesn't outright permit raw milk sales, that might be a way to go.
Yeah, we did a herd share for a while, but it was not profitable, so we dropped it.
While we're on the topic of equipment, just a specific question is, are your inflations narrow bore or Jersey inflations?
I was going to ask the same question.
Okay.
Like, that's a good question.
Yeah, the inflations are round bore. They're narrow round bore inflations. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah. April asks, can you tell us more about the production from what would you expect out of a high producing ewe, an average ewe, and what is low enough that you would cull that ewe?
Well, we're still building our flock, so we are still calling for production. I would say that at the height of our season this year, the average was 5 pounds a day. That has been superseded by a lot of sheep dairies in the US that have been around for longer and have really done a smart job of selecting for higher producing ewes. I think we started out at about 3 pounds a day. Just for reference, 8.6 pounds is a gallon.
Okay, that's the same as with cow milk.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that that production is not the only thing we select for, and for anyone considering any type of dairy, you need to balance that with your management system. And so when we have our lambs nursing on those ewes for that first 30-day period and we are not milking, it would actually be very difficult to manage a ewe that's producing, say, 7 pounds a day, because the lamb can't take that, right? And so the ewe will either not be able to, we'll have to milk that ewe out in addition, or the lamb well, or the ewe will suffer. And so it's important to consider how you're managing your lambing period. You can have a high milk producing ewe, but then you need to start milking on the first day.
And we're right at 2 o'clock, so maybe 2 more questions, Catherine. Do you want to pick one? I've got 3 about, or 2 or 3 about when you reach breeding age, but I'll let you go first, Catherine.
Oh, okay. You go ahead and then let me find one.
Okay, and you can pick the one you want to know. I want to know the answer to this. So are you breeding your ewes as lambs? And so are they lambing at a year? And then another question asks, sort of related to that. So do you wait until they're over a year?
Right. Good question. So sheep are fertile, ewes are fertile at 7 months. So we breed at 7 months. And there are some dairies that choose to wait until the sheep is at the next cycle the following year to breed. We have found no humane issue, no physical challenges with what we call our yearlings, our 7-month olds being bred at that age. If you're operating a commercial sheep dairy, you kind of want to know as soon as possible if a ewe lamb at 7 months is going to be a good milker, good temperament, et cetera, good grazer. You want to know that as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're feeding that yearling an entire year, or 2 years actually, until she's milked for the first time. And if you have a dud, then you've put that extra year of feed and labor into her, and you're kind of out of luck.
You don't find, like, so with cows, a first time heifer is not going to produce anywhere near as much milk as a full cow, a fully grown cow. So you don't find that's the case with sheep? Is that different?
Well, they do. The yearlings do produce less than the mature ewes, but we can compare to other yearlings. We can understand the direction she's headed in.
Yeah, and right, and the only thing to add there would be that yearlings in gestation, they need a different feed program compared with mature ewes. They actually need more nutrition, more energy, and more protein to help them continue growing during that period. And also, what was about the production? Well, that's it. Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm actually going to share my screen and put on a slide, so we're about ready to finish up here. But Catherine, if you want to ask your last question.
Yeah. Oh, now I've just lost it. I wanted to kind of combine two. One was, oh yeah, what's your general pasture rotation schedule? And then also, how well does movable fencing work for sheep?
All right.
Well, this is more of a general sheep question, but because we raise dairy animals, we bring our girls into the barn twice a day, so they get fresh grass when they leave the barn. So they get a fresh patch of, a paddock of grass when they are done being milked. And the fencing is actually very effective. Our mature ewes no longer challenge it in any way. Some of our lambs do, but it's very cumbersome to work with. This is the white electric netting we're talking about. So we do put a lot of labor into moving it, but of course that gives us control over the rotation.
Right. Well, I have a few housekeeping items to share before we sign off today. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be available within the next few days, and probably tomorrow. It depends on when the snow starts and how excited I am about the snow. And Catherine actually lives in Rougemont, North Carolina as well, and she is just as excited about the snow as I am. So these documents will be archived on our website, and I will email them to you. And then we will also we've got a few more webinars coming up this winter / early spring. So I will send links to all of those coming up in that email. And yeah, and just a sincere thank you to Carrie and Brent. This has been really, really great. You guys were fantastic, obviously so knowledgeable, and thank you for answering everybody's questions and being so kind as to put together this presentation. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much, and goodbye for now, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Maybe I won't start a sheep dairy now. I don't know. We'll see. Bye, guys.